Hi students, welcome to my science class. Today I am going to explain the chapter Materials, Metals and Non-Metals for class 8th. In this part we are discussed about physical properties of a metals and non-metals. Introduction. In our day-to-day life, we use many well-known materials like iron, aluminium, copper, gold, silver and many more. We are also familiar with elements like oxygen, carbon, sulfur as well. These are all obtained from some naturally occurring substances encompassing one or more elements or their compounds. They are termed as minerals. Minerals form which elements can be profitably extracted are termed as ores. There are 92 well known naturally occurring minerals, of which 70 are metals and rest 20 are the non metals. In our periodic table, there are 118 elements are present. In that, 92 elements are metals, 20 are non-metals and 6 are metalloids. Means in that periodic table, those elements are classified into three types, that is metals, non-metals and metalloids. 92 are metals, 20 are non-metals and 6 are metalloids. Some metals possesses the characteristics of both metals as well as non-metals. They are termed as metalloids. For example, boron, silicon, germanium, arsenic, antimony, tellurium, and polonium. Elements found in free state include some metals like gold, silver, platinum, etc., and some nonmetals like helium, neon, argon, etc. as well. Firstly, we are discussed about the physical properties of a metal. Metals are solid except mercury that is found in liquid state at room temperature. Means except mercury, rest of the metals are all solid in nature. But mercury that is found in liquid state at room temperature. Generally, metals are solid in nature. Second physical property of metal is they have a high melting points except cesium and gallium. These two metals are having a very low melting point. Generally, metals are having a high melting points. And the third physical property of a metal is metals are hard and tough except sodium and potassium. These two metals are very soft and that can be cut with a knife. It's clear? So generally metals are hard in nature. And the fourth property of metal is they are a luster. That is, they shine in light because metals possesses free electrons that vibrates on getting in contact with light. For example, gold and silver. These are metals and they show luster's property. And next property is metals are good conductors of heat and electricity, and the best conductor of electricity are silver and copper, whereas lead and mercury are comparatively poor conductors. Generally, metals are good conductors of heat and electricity. Look at this figure. Here, metal is used at the tip of the plug that is inserted into the socket. Nothing but metal is a good conductor of electricity. Next physical property of metal is generally metals are malleable. Malleable nothing but they can be beaten into a thin sheet. Means metals can be beaten into a thin sheet. For example, the aluminium. It is one of the metal. The aluminium foil we use to make a food is manufactured by beating the aluminium metal into a thin sheet. This is a characteristics property of a metal. Look at this figure here. Aluminium metal is beaten into a thin sheet to make a aluminium foil used to pack a food. Next physical property of metal is they are ductile. Ductility nothing but they can be drawn into a wires. For example, we all are familiar with copper and aluminium wires. It is due to their characteristics property of a ductility that these metals can be drawn into a thin wires. You will be really surprised to know that a wire of about 2 km length can be drawn from 1 gram of a gold. Means generally metals shows ductility property. And the last property of a metal is they are sonorous. They produce a ringing sound when struck against a hard object. For example, your school bells are made of metals that produces a ringing sound after the period is over when struck hard by a hammer. Look at this figure. Here, bell in temples are made of metals that when struck against hard substances, they produce a sound. So for that reason, metals are sonorous, means they produce a sound. Next is physical properties of a non-metals. Non-metals is nothing but a just opposite of a metals. So generally non-metals may be either solids, liquids or gaseous. Solids, non-metals are brittle and break down into a powdery mass on striking with a hammer except diamond, which is the hardest non-metal. Diamond is one of the allotropic form of a carbon. So generally carbon is one of the non-metal. Okay, these are the exception cases. Generally non-metals are brittle in nature, means they are soft. But metal is hard and the non-metals are brittle in nature. The next physical property of a non-metal is generally non-metals have a dull lusters, means they do not shining or they do not possess luster property, but iodine is lustrous. These non-metals have showing a very low melting points except diamond that is a very high melting points. And next physical property of a non-metal is non-metals are a poor conductor of heat and electricity except graphite, and non-metals are not malleable and are not ductile and they are not sonorous. Examples for that carbon, sulfur, oxygen, phosphorus and many more. I just summarized the physical properties of metals and non-metals here. The first is metals are malleable, non-metals are non-malleable. Metals are ductile, non-metals are non-ductile. Metals are good conductors of heat and electricity, non-metals are bad conductors of heat and electricity. Metals are lusters and can be polished, non-metals are non-lusters. Metals are solid at room temperature except mercury that are exist in a liquid state. Non-metals may be a solid, liquid or gaseous at room temperature. The melting point and boiling points of a metals are generally high. Non-metals have a low melting point and boiling points as compared to metals. All metals are strong, means they are hard. Non-metals are not strong, means they are soft. Metals are heavy, non-metals are light substances. Metals are sonorous, means they produce a sound when struck with a hard substance. Non-metals are non-sonorous. In this part, we have discussed about physical properties of a metals and non-metals. Thank you all.